All right, welcome back to the Freak Show. This is episode 39. And today we're going to be talking about the frequency of relationships and how energy impacts connection. And we thought that it would be appropriate to talk about this because we are now in the midst of the holiday season. When we're recording this, Christmas is a week and a half away. And there's a lot of time spent with family and loved ones in general. And sometimes that's amazing and fulfilling, and it is really good for us. And sometimes it can be draining and really hard and challenging and leave you feeling like you need a month of vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime that you invite people outside of the older we get, the more kind of ingrained in our way of living and the way that we do things. And what are you laughing at?
It just makes me feel old when you say that.
Well, you know what I mean. The more seasoned we become,
Yeah.
you kind of have the way that you do things, the way that you perceive things, so forth and so on.
And the less we want to put up with, I
True.
think.
And
Yeah.
so whenever you bring other people into the mix, whether that's family, friends, whoever, it offers an opportunity, I think. But at the same time, it can be challenging. So,
Yeah. Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. And I think that that is very true. And I thought something that would be helpful for the listeners is if we kind of dissect our fallback energy, our fallback habits for when we are around family or when we have guests in our home, and how maybe we could do better. And I think over the years, we've gotten better and better and better and better. But I'm still not at the point where when we have people over for extended periods of time, that visit ends and I feel energized.
yeah.
And so I think we should just get really honest about how we react when we're around other people or when people are in our home.
Well, apologies up front, but to go off script a little bit,
Uh-oh.
why do you think that, to that quote, why do you think that is?
I think our families trigger us the most.
Because they're the people. Why do you think they trigger us the most?
Well, I think there are multiple scenarios here, but on the surface, number one, in general, not for everyone, you are closest to your family. And so your family may or may not know you best. So there's scenario number one. Scenario number two is if you go into the psychology of it, in general, your family members have given you a role. And if you're the oldest, like I am, maybe you're the responsible one. You're the one that plans. You're the one that makes sure things happen. Maybe if you're the baby, you are in that role of being babied, of always, your family members picking on you a little bit because they think you could do better at this and you could do this and this and this and this. Maybe you are a middle child and your role has been ignored a little bit. And so family dynamics can just be extremely difficult if family members do not grow with you. And what I mean by that is when you have, in my opinion, a really healthy relationship with your family members, they give you room to grow. They give you room to disagree. They give you room to change. And they don't keep putting you back into that psychological box that they want you in because that's what's comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so often when you have family members that are unwilling to see how you have changed or unwilling to have conversations about where you're at in life, then it can get really dicey because you feel like there's a disconnect between who you were, when you left home and who you are now.
Yeah.
And we should all be given grace and space to evolve and grow because we do, in an ideal scenario, right? Evolve and grow.
Yeah, I think of it as like a collision of paradigms because you grow up and you live in the paradigm of your family, of your parents, of your siblings, that sort of thing. And then you leave the nest and you start to create your own paradigm, and then you create a family and that creates its own paradigm. So if it's all these different paradigms, and the paradigms are the way that you view the world and the way that you make decisions, when those start to change, and then that you take that paradigm and you put that against the old paradigm of when you were a kid and how that part of your family operates, sometimes that,
That can be
causes
threatening.
conflict. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it can be threatening to other worldviews. And if someone isn't very self aware, someone who does things differently can feel threatening because then you have to start thinking about how you approach things.
You're challenging a worldview.
It's challenging
That's
worldview.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think we should talk about my fallback habits when we are around family for extended periods of time, whether that's in our house or in their house. And I'll give my observation of how I react. And then I want you to give your honest observation. And then we can talk about how I can improve. And then I think we should do the same for you.
Okay.
So I have a tendency to want to make everybody really comfortable, want to have everything prepared, want to have the guest rooms ready and people's favorite way to make their coffee, all the ingredients ready to go. And I like deep connection in relationships. So surface level stuff is like swallowing sand for me. I can't stand it. After about 30 seconds, it takes every ounce of energy for me to engage because it's just so boring for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we are not having good conversation, or if we are not, if it doesn't feel like I'm allowed or welcome to be myself, I have a very kinetic energy. I try and make myself busy. I go into performance mode, I think, which is trying to make people laugh, trying to engage, trying to lighten the mood, trying to make people comfortable. But at the end of the day, because I am trying to think about how other people feel, since I'm very much an empath, I'm so exhausted and I feel so drained at the end of the day that it's like hard for me to gear up and do it again the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a tendency to burn like really bright and really fiery and then burn out very, very quickly
Mm-hmm.
and feel very frustrated and um in some ways taken for granted. You know, the other day you mentioned a podcast and you said in the podcast, the guy that was being interviewed said, men, their primary question is,
Am I good enough?
and for women, our primary question is,
Do you see me?
and that's always my primary question, do you see me? And I feel like I try so hard because I want real connection with people. And not everybody is capable of seeing us, and not everybody is capable of seeing me. And I understand that in my head, but it's very hard for me to understand that in my heart. So in the past, I've walked away from lots of time spent with family feeling so frustrated that I feel like my efforts to connect and my efforts to care for people are often overlooked and not appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
So spending lots of time with family can be very hard for me. I feel in general very drained at the end of it.
Yeah.
Um, what's your observation of me in particular?
I think that one, I understand why that's your reaction and why you feel the way that you're explaining and expressing. Um,
Thank you.
yeah,
I know you
first and
see me.
foremost. Yeah. Um, I think I think the big thing there is, and this will kind of translate to when we talk about how I interact in these environments, is um, one, you're searching for your definition of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people have varying different ways to connect, levels of connection, what that looks like. So yours is a very like, I don't know how to explain it, but a very, I feel like, textbook way. If you were to like say what does like connection mean, and what is that definition, I feel like that is yours, like as deep as possible, as honest as possible, accepting, all those things. But the reality is that's just not how most people operate. um, and that's hard, especially when it's family, those
Mm-hmm.
people that are, closest to you and care about you the most. Because, and I want to say that they care about you more than anybody else, and that doesn't change, but it comes down to how do they express that.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to, I think, understand that when I don't necessarily feel connected.
Sure.
Like I can understand, I'm pointing at my head for those of you that are listening. I can understand that somebody cares for me, but I don't necessarily feel it.
Yeah, and because I think you're looking for them to connect with you the way that you define connection. And the
That's
reality
just
is
not possible most of the
that's
time.
just not going to happen. It's just
Yeah.
not going to happen. I
Yeah.
think that that's possible for people to change the way that they connect,
Mm-hmm.
when it's a relationship like yours and mine, where the time is spent, it's day in, day out, coming together from that perspective.
Yeah. And we
But
talk about everything.
yeah, but when you're getting together here and there, and it's it's I don't want to be pessimistic about it, but it really is an unrealistic expectation for people to change their paradigms,
Yeah.
um uh, to meet your expectation.
Oh, totally. Totally. And again, I can psychologically understand that the heart wants what it wants.
Sure.
And I'm a person who wants like real connection. It's not hard for me to get along with people. It's not hard for me to make friends, but the people that I'm really close to, I can count on one hand
Yeah. And
because it just
I think
matters to
that's
me so
pretty,
much.
yeah. And I think that's pretty common. That's
Yeah.
kind of how it works. But
Yeah. So let's talk about how I can improve and then we'll launch into you. I feel like um stoic philosophy is a really good approach for me. Control what I can control, and let go of all expectations, for connection, for closeness, for those things, because I've tried for a long time and things generally don't change a whole lot. Um, though there have been some improvements here and there, but I think letting go of my expectations for relationships puts me in a better place where I don't feel so spent at the end.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I think also taking more time to do what fills me up, even when people are here. My mom, when she would host people, was always like, "What can I do for you? What can I get for you?" Well, just such a consummate host. And I think she made people feel extremely welcome, which is good. But at the same time, she did the same thing that I do. And then by the end of it, she was just totally spent for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I need to very respectfully take more time for myself to recharge. I generally unless I'm with people that I'm really close to, do not recharge around other people.
Mm-hmm.
I recharge when I'm by myself. So, taking time to go take a bath or going to bed early instead of staying up late with everyone. Things like that are really good for me because I feel most safe when I am by myself or when I am with you
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a couple of other people, but primarily feel the safest and the most recharged when I'm in solitary confinement.
Yeah, same.
And so I think taking that time is absolutely essential for me when we're with a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Do you see any holes in my thinking or anywhere?
No, I don't see any holes, but we've had this conversation before.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's uh it's just expectations,
Mm-hmm.
not expecting people to, and it's not a thing about, it's not right versus wrong. I think
Sure.
that's key to recognizing that. Now there are boundaries, if people are rude or if people, are not doing things that are unacceptable, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But, not meeting the nuances of emotional expectations, I think just coming into it with, hey, if this person has shown me that this is how they operate and this is the
Yeah.
way that
Believe
they do
them.
things, believe it
Yeah.
and expect it and don't expect anything more.
Yeah.
And and you can have relationship like that. I'm not saying that that's how you want to build and, grow relationships broadly,
Yeah.
as you network and pursue those sorts of things. But when it comes to family and those people that are, um, you know, you that truly at the end of the day love you and care about you more than anybody in the world does, that's the level of acceptance and accepting the um, expectation,
Yeah.
having legitimate expectations
And
around
I
that.
so get that in my head, but my heart just goes wah, wah, like how boring. But it's like I can't change it. So what am I gonna
Well,
do?
boring is better than being devastated, or
Yeah.
being completely just emotionally drained. And who knows?
I
Maybe I'm
think I
wrong.
I think well, I think the way that you're looking at it is very logical and very male. And I think the best way of looking at it for me so that it doesn't feel heavy and depressing is I just need to protect my energy. And that's it. And that's okay. I
Hmm.
think, being who I am on a DNA level, it feels weird to go into scenarios protecting my energy because I want to be so open and so overt.
Hmm.
But I have done that over and over in the past and felt like I was kind of like bombed. So, not to play the victim, not to play the victim. I'm not trying to play the victim. I'm sure I've done things too. But I think best perspective that I can have that feels healthy and not depressing is just protect your energy.
Yeah,
Zip it up so that I don't feel completely drained and tapped.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's a
I
means
just
to
feel
an
like
end.
I feel like that perspective like I need a more positive approach than like just don't be devastated.
No, no.
you
Well,
know.
that's not what I'm saying, and I
I
and I
know
don't
I
I
know
don't think
I
that what
know
I'm
that that's
saying
not what you're
is
saying.
is depressing. What I'm just saying is like this is what it is, so don't expect anything different.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're right. And you're absolutely right. But to me, words matter so much. And so when I say, okay, I'm going to go into this scenario protecting my energy, that's a much more positive connotation for me.
Okay.
And I always want to stay in that positive headspace.
Okay.
Okay. Now, let's talk about what your habits are when we're around family for extended periods of time.
Well, I think I protect my energy.
And I would say you shut down.
I know.
Yeah. So give me your perspective. How would you describe how you act or how you think you act in these situations?
Well, I mean, I think that it's been a process. I think that it's been a process for a long time now. And there is that, keep going back to or I keep bringing it back to the whole paradigm conversation of when you get in that scenario, it's easy to be drawn back into that. Like you were talking about,
Your default.
you served this role when you were
Yeah.
this age or whatever, so you fall back into that. And I think I do that in a lot of ways. Um, but at the same time, I think it was what best served me at
Sure.
that point in time, and
Yeah.
so it is the default.
Yeah.
But I know that it makes it difficult for you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But why do you think it makes it difficult for me?
Well, because you say I shut down. I think that I kind of do what you're talking about doing, maybe to a higher extent
What do you mean talking
of
about what I'm doing?
protecting your energy.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, um,
But what does that look like in action? If my energy is kinetic and I'm trying to make people laugh and make people comfortable and keep the conversation going,
I I'm more reserved. I'm hanging back. I'm not and it depends on the scenario.
sure.
But much more topical, not looking to rock the boat in any way, trying
Yeah.
to keep a steady sea.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that one that sacrifices that level of depth in the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
but over time, I'm trying to figure out how to best explain it. I think over time, it's an acceptance of what is,
Yeah.
and there have been those times and those periods where I've stepped out of that stepped out of that paradigm or whatever you want to call it, um, and learned that it's safer in the ship,
Yeah.
and accepting that can be hard
Sure.
and it takes some reflection. But
I
also
think that's a
there's
whole other episode is acceptance.
yeah, there's also growth in that
Mm-hmm.
in that ability to accept uh, your family and the people in your life uh, where they are and what that relationship is going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and being okay with that
Mm-hmm.
and moving forward in that. But
Yeah.
back to this conversation, you are the um, you're the one that is injecting energy into the
Mm-hmm.
situation, and you're not really getting a lot of help from me.
Yeah.
So
I feel
that's
like you leave me hanging.
well,
Or I feel like you're like, she's got it.
well,
She'll make sure that the conversation
yeah,
isn't totally
yeah.
awkward.
To be fair, yeah, yeah, there's some of that, but uh, yeah, I don't know, where to go from here. But that's also your personality versus my
Well,
personality.
I think here's the truth of it. I feel a responsibility to try and make sure that things don't get awkward, but it's actually not my responsibility.
Yeah.
And so I could get frustrated with you that I feel like you leave me hanging, but it's also not your responsibility to make sure everybody feels comfortable.
Hmm.
So in this scenario, it
And I
doesn't.
don't feel responsible.
Yeah, I know you don't. I know you don't. But I am the oldest. I feel responsible for everything. Can you guys relate if you are the oldest in the family? I feel responsible for everything, and I feel responsible for making sure other people feel comfortable. But there's no point in me getting mad at you for that because it's not your responsibility. And there's no point in me when I don't have the energy to be giving to continue to give and give and give
Mm-hmm.
and expect anything different. So
Mm-hmm.
in this situation, let's say it's nobody's fault and we just let it be.
Mm-hmm.
Like Book Wild by Cheryl Strayed, the last line, sorry to ruin it for you guys, is how wild it was to let it be. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons of my life is letting things be. I always think there's room for improvement. We can do better. And sometimes you can,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of the time you can't because it's in relationships, it's multiple people and everybody has to be on board. So, my lesson here is to let it be and protect my energy.
Yeah.
What is your lesson here?
I think my lesson is you can have deep feelings and deep relationships with people
Mm-hmm.
on whatever plane works.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have, people don't have to meet all of your expectations. You don't have to meet all of theirs. But if you find that common ground, that you can still have that true relationship with
As
people.
true as that relationship can be. And I think
I
I
disagree.
think there are varying levels.
Uh, I disagree. I think this is back to your
See, I don't
definition.
think you can have like the truest, highest frequency form of relationship unless both parties really see each other. I just don't think you can because you can't have that equal connection. I think you can still have a connection and it's not necessarily a toxic one or a bad one, but I don't think it's the highest form of connection in any way, shape, or form.
Um, I I mean,
You have to be
you're
able to
saying
see the other.
highest form of connection. I'm just
Well, I
saying
just
like
said there's
a
different
deep
levels.
connection.
Yeah, and I said there's different levels of connection. And I think that
Okay.
that's true. You have very deep levels of connection and you have more surfacey levels of connection. And when you talk about true connection, because you just said true connection to me is I see you. I see your heart. I see who you are. And you see me. You see my heart. You see who I am. That is a deep, true connection.
Yeah,
We're
but I
not going
think
to
that
be
you
able to
can do that with I think you can
surface.
do
You
that
can
in
do that with
different I'm
surface
not it
conversations.
it doesn't have to be words. There are different ways that people communicate and show you things. People
Sure.
can say the wrong words all the time, but if they do the right things, I'm going to put more value on what they do versus what they say.
Yeah. And I am too.
So, and I think that it goes with that goes in a lot of different directions as far as relationships go. There, when men and women have different sorts of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends. I have like you. I'm trying to think of an example, but guys don't necessarily have a deep level of
Heart to heart connection.
heart to heart conversations.
So, anyway, we're talking about how connection is possible. But I think to round this out for people like me who really value deep connection, having an expectation party with ourselves to get realistic about what's possible is very helpful. So then you're not going into this time spent with people you do care about, expecting some deep level of connection or something other than what it is. And maybe it will surprise you. But I think having realistic expectations is really good. And then also being very intentional about protecting our energy and making sure that we're doing what we need to feel filled up and not drained.
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to round it out?
Well, I think there's you can't pour from an empty cup, so you got to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in the process. You know, do things you enjoy doing because all that's going to do is help you to show up for everybody else around you.
Yeah.
So I think it's not unselfish to put yourself first because then you have the energy to kind of pour out, and it takes a lot of energy, you know,
Yeah.
these this time of year, and
Especially with a 2-year-old too, who requires a lot of energy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think that that it can sound selfish on the surface level, but it's really a way of just filling your cup so you can be there
So
for
you can be at a high frequency for yourself and for other people.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Question we want to leave our listeners with, our
Go ahead.
beautiful listeners. How can you bring high frequency energy to time spent with family and loved ones this holiday season?
I didn't spell that. I didn't write the grammar in that sentence when I typed it out wasn't very good.
That's okay. I think I got it. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and we'll be back with the next episode next week.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much for listening to The Freak Show with Sam Thurmond and me, Jacqueline Steele Thurmond. We would love to connect with you via our website, beckonliving.com, and on social media.
You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Beck and Living, and you can join our email list to receive uplifting messages, podcast and business updates, and discounts on high frequency products just for our freaky community.
Cheers to high frequency living.